In the close-knit community of Tracy, California, a sense of safety was shattered when a young girl named Sandra Renee Cantu disappeared without a trace. Her story is one of innocence lost, a community in turmoil, and the search for answers. The disappearance of Sandra sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, prompting a massive search effort involving law enforcement, volunteers, and concerned citizens, all united by a common goal: to bring her home safely. Sandra was a vivacious and playful 8-year-old girl, known for her infectious laughter and bright smile. Her disappearance left her family and friends in anguish, desperately hoping for her safe return. As days turned into weeks, the mystery surrounding Sandra's vanishing deepened. The community held its breath, anxiously awaiting any new developments that might lead to her discovery. Law enforcement officers worked tirelessly to unravel the puzzle of Sandra's disappearance. Every lead was followed, and every piece of evidence was meticulously examined, as they sought to bring clarity to a perplexing case. This is the story of Sandra Renee Cantu, a young girl whose life was tragically cut short. Sandra Renee Cantu was born on March 8, 2001, to her parents Maria Chavez and Daniel Cantu, and raised at Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy, California, where she lived with her mother, grandparents, and 3 older siblings. She was a second-grade student at Melville S. Jacobson Elementary School. She was a beautiful young girl who was 9 at the time of her murder. Sandra was known to be outgoing, super friendly, adventurous, and had so much energy. She had many friends, and everyone around her trailer park adored her. She was like a shining light in all the lives that she touched, and all she wanted to do was help people. She had many hobbies such as singing, dancing, and coloring, and loved to help with cooking and join her grandparents when they were gardening. Sandra loved to go out almost every day to play with her friends. She'd normally leave and go off to her friends' houses and knock on their doors to see if anyone would want to play outside. Even when no one could join her, she just played outside by herself. Sandra's mother, Maria, knew pretty much everyone in the trailer park and never really had to worry about the safety of her children when going outside to play. But one night she didn't come home. On Friday, March 27, 2009, Sandra dropped off her backpack at home and went out to find some friends to play with until approximately 4 p.m., when she returned home. She later left home saying that she was going to play at another friend's house and she knew she had to be back in time for dinner. When she did not return for dinner, Maria didn't panic right away. She called up a bunch of the neighbors whom Sandra played with frequently, but no one claimed to see Sandra. Maria went outside and started calling out for her, and walked around to look for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Maria called the police at approximately 7:30 p.m. and reported her daughter missing. Investigators went around to every trailer in the trailer park and asked if anyone had seen Sandra. They showed them her photo and explained that she was wearing a Hello Kitty t-shirt and black leggings when she went missing. Since Sandra's grandfather installed a CCTV camera in case anything suspicious happened on their block, the detectives collected footage recorded by a surveillance camera. In the footage, Sandra was skipping around, perfectly happy as she crossed the street in front of her home before moving out of frame. However, she was only seen leaving in the direction away from her home, and she never even tried to make it back home. In the footage, police also noticed that it looked like she was heading towards home, but something, or someone, had caught her attention, and she walked in a different direction than she had initially intended. The footage was played on national news stations and a $22,000 reward was offered for information in the case. This case became widespread around California, and soon it hit the entire nation. There were hundreds, if not thousands of people looking for Sandra. Missing child posters were put up everywhere, including police dogs, equestrian teams, all-terrain vehicles, and a helicopter from the California Highway Patrol were brought in to search for Sandra. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, was called in to assist on the case. The detectives tried to find some leads, but unfortunately, they couldn't find anything worth investigating. Investigators found out that Sandra's parents were separated around the time of her disappearance and they were in the middle of finalizing the divorce. Investigators then asked Maria if her ex-husband might have taken her, for revenge, or to upset her. Maria denied it all. She claimed that she knew her ex-husband very well, and she mentioned that he would never do anything like that. However, investigators needed to confirm it, and they got in contact with him. Her father claimed he hadn't been in Sandra's life for a few years now, and they were able to confirm his alibi, as he wasn't even in California at the time she went missing. Maria then told the detectives to look into one man who lived in the trailer park and was known to have been a pedophile. This was an older man who was witnessed 2 years prior, when Sandra was 6 years old, pushing the hair out of her face and kissing her on the lips at a local swimming pool. The detectives took this man in for questioning and confronted him about his actions towards Sandra 2 years ago at the time. The man laughed and played it off, telling investigators that it was just harmless affection. The detectives told him it was no laughing matter, and it was sexual assault against a minor. The man then got all serious and told investigators that he had an unhealthy attraction to young girls, specifically in the age range between 9 and 11 years old. This shot up huge red flags because this man just admitted to having an attraction to girls exactly around the age of Sandra, who was 8 years old at the time of her disappearance. However, the man did have a confirmed alibi and cleared him of any involvement. During Sandra's vigil, many people showed up, even people who didn't even know Sandra or her family until the news about her disappearance came up. People wanted to show their support to the family, and even the detectives showed up, along with the FBI. The detectives showed up because some of them wanted to feel close to the family, as they had children around Sandra's age, and to hopefully see someone acting in a suspicious manner, which turned out to be a good idea. As it is known by detectives that in many cases the perpetrator would show up to vigils, funerals, search parties, and anything about their victims, because they often want to feel powerful or entertained by what they've done, or they want to feel like they're in so much control of the situation. Later on in Sandra's vigil, a woman barged through the vigil in panic and cried hysterically as she pushed people out of her way to get to the investigators. The woman informed them that she had just found something related to the disappearance of Sandra. The investigators could barely understand this woman due to how hysterical she was. She was barely able to breathe, hyperventilating and stricken with fear. When the detectives were finally able to calm her down enough to get her to take them to where this clue is that she's speaking of, she led the detectives over to where her mailbox was, and on the ground, they found a note that read, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase. Thrown in water on Baquetti Road and Whitehall Road. Witness." At this point, the investigators were feeling a lot of mixed reactions. On one hand, they had just received this note stating that Sandra was dead. On the other hand, they're starting to feel a little suspicious because the same woman identified as Melissa Huckabee, who had supposedly been given this note, is the same woman who reported her suitcase as missing around the same time Sandra went missing. Investigators had so many questions in their heads, like what are the chances that the same woman who reported her suitcase as stolen is the same woman to be given this note? Shouldn't this note have been sent to Sandra's mother? Why her of all people? Was this note written by the perpetrator? Was it written by an actual witness? Or was the note fake, written to get attention and waste the time of the investigators? The detectives gave out the note to be reviewed by handwriting specialists, and the results came back stating that not only did the handwriting look as if it was faked, but there were also a lot of very obvious spelling mistakes. Also, they noticed that the suitcase was written stolen in the note, but why would the killer write that it was stolen? Wouldn't they have just written suitcase? If this was an actual witness, how would they have even known that the suitcase was stolen? The only lead at the time was the woman, Melissa Huckabee, and the investigators started examining her a little more because she must have known something about the disappearance of Sandra, or she is seeking some unknown attention. Melissa was a Sunday school teacher, whose father was a pastor, and had a daughter of her own around the same age as Sandra. Melissa also had a few mental health conditions such as borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. During her interview with the detectives, she claimed that she had been at her church decorating her classroom around 4 p.m. when Sandra had last been seen. The detectives asked her if she could show them any proof of her being there, and she claimed that she had called the police from the church to notify them about her suitcase. The police checked their phone records and confirmed that she had called from the church. However, this didn't mean Melissa was fully out of the woods yet. Just because Sandra was last seen at 4 p.m. doesn't mean that she had gone missing at 4 p.m. She could have been taken at any time between 4 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. when her mother called the police. Even though Melissa had been a little shady, detectives still were not convinced that she was the killer. They mainly thought that she had just been doing this for attention-seeking purposes. With nothing to hold against her, she was released, and detectives went around to talk to her neighbors to find out if anyone could tell them any information about Melissa. They were informed that it's very common for her to do things that bring attention to her, and that she also acted strangely towards the neighborhood children. When asked for an example, they were told that Melissa had taken one of the neighbor's children to the park for a couple of hours without letting her parents know. When their daughter returned home, she was incoherent and slurring her words. She was taken to the doctor, who found that Melissa had drugged her with benzodiazepines, a depressant that produces sedation and hypnosis. By that time, the detectives now considered Melissa as a person of interest and asked her if they could seize her car to look for any evidence, and she agreed. They weren't expecting to find anything, but they found a sticky note in her glove box. It seemed to have a few words written onto it, which had been scribbled over many times, making it hard to read what had been written. The investigators again gave out that sticky note to the handwriting and paper specialists, and they received very suspicious feedback. The 3 words that were written on that sticky note were Backetty Road, Whitehall Road, Water. However, the detectives still were not convinced that she had murdered Sandra, as her body was not found yet, and nothing incriminating was found at that time. They stuck with that this note was most likely written by her, and that she was still doing all of this for attention. However, they can't leave any stone unturned, and they had to get a warrant to search Melissa's home, where they found a notebook in her dresser that had a page ripped out of it. On the next page, they saw imprints of words that were most likely written on the page that was ripped out. Once again, the detectives gave out the notebook to the handwriting and paper specialists, and the feedback came back. Not only did the imprinted words look the same as the words in the note given to the police, but it was the same paper that the note was written on. But still, the investigators needed more than just a possible fake note to charge her with anything. They felt like they were losing leads and getting nowhere with the case. The detectives then got another lead when a retired U.S. Marine and his wife notified police that they had spotted Melissa and her SUV at the irrigation pond on their property at Backetty Road and Whitehall Road between 5:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. on March 27. They reportedly recognized Melissa on television. The witness described her as distracted and hurried, and she told him that she just had to pee real quick when he saw her. The detectives continued to review the footage from the surveillance camera installed outside Sandra's home, which showed Sandra walking in the direction of Melissa's residence at 3:54 p.m. on March 27. The camera captured Melissa's SUV driving in the opposite direction 8 minutes later. At approximately the same time, Melissa called to report that her suitcase had been stolen from her trailer. 85 minutes later, a surveillance camera located outside the parking lot of the church at which Melissa taught Sunday school captured her driving away from the church. 30 minutes after that, she was captured returning to the church, and it was during this 30-minute time frame that she was spotted at the irrigation pond. The detectives then got a warrant to search her Sunday school classroom in the church, as she mentioned that she was there around the time that Sandra had gone missing. In the classroom, they found very bizarre things. They found one of the white strings to the blinds in her classroom that seemed to have been cut off, and then retied, and so a chunk of it was missing for whatever reason. Then, they checked out the kitchen and found a red smudge mark on a rolling pin. They bagged up both of these things and sent them off to the laboratory for DNA testing. The detectives also checked out the suspects mentioned by Melissa during her interview. The first suspect she gave them was a man who had been known to drug children. The detectives found this to be quite strange, as there weren't any records of that man being a sex offender or drugging any children, but they brought him in for questioning. The other two suspects were a father and son duo, both of which were adults. Melissa claimed during the interview that these men had pictures of young girls on their phones, including pictures of Sandra. The duo were brought in for questioning and their phones were seized. Surprisingly, they did find images of young girls on these phones, including images of Sandra, just like Melissa had claimed. The images were found to be innocent or subjective at best, and nothing that they could charge them with. Later on, they found an image of Sandra sitting on one of the men's laps, which police found odd because why would you have a young child that you barely know sitting on your lap? These three men, along with the man who had kissed Sandra on the lips 2 years ago, were given polygraph tests and only one man passed it. The detectives were confused, because could these three men, along with Melissa, be the culprit? Were they all working together? Or does someone know more than they are admitting? The man who had kissed Sandra on the lips passed the test, which the investigators assumed would happen as he had a reliable alibi. The man who was accused of drugging children failed his test. However, the investigators released him because he also had a reliable alibi but still had to keep a close eye on him. The father and son duo also both failed their tests. But before the investigators were able to question them further, they made a discovery that they never imagined they would make. The pond that the note stated Sandra's body was in was drained, and they found a suitcase. The suitcase was put into a body bag and sent to the laboratory. When it arrived in the laboratory, the coroner opened the body bag, lifted the suitcase, and put it on the table. They immediately knew, from just the weight of the suitcase, that a body was inside of it. They also suspected it was due to the awful smell that was coming from it. It smelled like decomposing human flesh. They began opening the suitcase, and it was confirmed that a child's body was inside. However, the decomposition was so bad, they couldn't immediately identify her. They had to use the information they had about what she was wearing to make an identification. The coroner stated that she was murdered just a couple of hours after she was abducted. Just by looking at her body, they didn't notice any injuries, outside of a cut on the inside of her lip, which could have been done by accident. Sandra's body had been sent in for an autopsy, where they discovered that Sandra's cause of death was strangulation. She was sexually assaulted with a foreign object and she was drugged with a lot of benzodiazepines. Once again, glaring red flags going off in the detectives' heads. Melissa was initially confirmed to have drugged a child once before with the same medication, and she also accused a man of drugging children, while having nothing to confirm that accusation. The detectives also wondered why Sandra's clothes were put back on after being sexually assaulted. According to investigators, most of the time when a victim is sexually assaulted, the clothes are either thrown into wherever the body is placed, or they're completely missing, but in this case, Sandra's clothes were placed back on her body, and it was assumed that the person was either most likely a woman, or someone who felt remorseful and wanted to give Sandra the last bit of dignity she could have before being tossed away. It was also at this time that the results came in regarding the items found in the church. The white string was confirmed to be the same string that was tied around the suitcase, and the red smudge mark on the rolling pin was confirmed to be Sandra's blood. When the police went to arrest Melissa and bring her in for questioning, she wasn't home. She was reportedly in the hospital because she tried to commit suicide by swallowing razor blades, and the police had to wait until she was released from the hospital to question her as instructed by the doctor. The detectives then decided to bug her phone, and since she was in the hospital, she'd have no idea that her phone was bugged. They got a call history in which Melissa called Sandra's mother and asked her if her daughter, Sandra's older sister, would like to come over and play with her daughter. Police raced over to Melissa's home, and when they arrived, there were no children inside at all. Not even her daughter. Melissa was trying to abduct and kill another child from the same family, but fortunately, it never happened. Finally, she was released from the hospital, and during her questioning, she first denied the allegations. But when detectives told her that they had evidence against her, and they even had a statement by two people who witnessed her at the pond on the day of Sandra's disappearance, she completely broke down in tears and started confessing. At first, she would claim Sandra passed on accidentally, omitting the fact that she was drugged, sexually assaulted, and then strangled to death. She later on realized she was not getting away with this, and told them what the real story was. She confessed that she saw Sandra walking around and called her over. Melissa told her that she was going to the church to decorate her classroom. Sandra, being the kind helper that she was, offered to go with her to help decorate. Once they got to the church, Melissa crushed up a bunch of pills and put them inside a large glass of juice, which she gave to Sandra and sedated Sandra very deeply. That's when she began to undress her, sexually assault her with the rolling pin, put her clothes back on, and then strangled her. She mentioned that they got to the church at around 4:30 p.m. and she was murdered by 5:30 p.m., and then dropped into the pond by 6 p.m. This means that Sandra was murdered before her mother even had the chance to report her missing. When the investigators asked her why she did this, she never gave them a real answer. She just told them that she didn't know why she did it, and that she regrets ever doing it immensely. In April of 2009, Melissa was charged with the murder of Sandra Cantu, along with being charged with drugging a 7-year-old boy and a 37-year-old man. However, Melissa was given a plea bargain to drop the drug charges and refrain from getting the death penalty, as long as she pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra. She accepted this deal and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Melissa never admitted to why she killed Sandra. It was impossible to believe that she had no real motive to commit a crime that was so carefully premeditated. The prosecutor in the case speculated that she murdered Sandra for attention. Sandra's story has sparked a collective effort to raise awareness about child safety and the importance of vigilance within our communities. Community initiatives and support organizations have been established to educate and empower parents and children alike. As we remember Sandra, we honor her memory by advocating for the safety and well-being of all children. Her legacy serves as a reminder that no child should ever experience harm and that our collective efforts can create a safer world for future generations. In the end, Sandra Renee Cantu's legacy will be one of unity and resilience. May her memory inspire us to continue working together to protect and cherish the innocence of childhood, ensuring that every child can grow up in a world filled with love and safety.